Hello, this is Mr. Slade leading you through the Chapter 2 Part 1 test review. This test review will prepare you for the math test that is coming up later this week. Let's begin. Before we begin the review, let's go through some vocabulary that will help you be successful on the test. The first term that you need to know is variable. Variable is the symbol for the number that we do not know yet. You'll see in this example equation, this symbol is x. The variable is almost always represented by a letter, and throughout algebra, we usually see x or y as the variable in our problem. The next term is equation. Equation is just a mathematical sentence that contains an equal sign. In this review, we will be doing one-step, two-step, and multiple-step equations. All of these equations have equal signs, and usually they have a variable in them. Our next term is inverse operation. You'll hear me talk about inverse when I'm looking to isolate the variable or move numbers to the other side of the equation. In order to do that, I have to do the opposite operation or the inverse operation. So for example, the inverse of addition is subtraction. The inverse of subtraction is addition. The inverse of multiplication is division, and the inverse of division is obviously multiplication. These are inverse operations, and I will talk about these throughout our algebra problems. Our final term that we need to know is like terms. Like terms is when we have terms with the same variable, it helps us to combine them. You'll see in my example that I have 5c plus 2c plus 4, and then if I combine them, I'm able to combine the 5c and the 2c to get a 7c, and those are my like terms. My 4 is not a like term because it does not have c next to it. Those are our vocabulary. Let's move on to one-step algebra. One-step algebra is our basic algebra. I know that all of us are able to do this in our head, but let me demonstrate the first two, the way to do one-step algebra through the first equation. I always start my algebra problem, this is something I like to do, by drawing a line through the equal sign. This helps me organize my problem. I know that all of my equal signs throughout are going to be on this line. It also signifies that there are two sides of a problem. My goal of algebra is to isolate the variable or get the variable by itself on one side of the problem. For my first problem, I have 2 plus x on one side of my equation. I know that I need to get my variable, or x, by itself. So I need to do the inverse operation. The inverse of plus 2 is minus 2. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to both sides. That means I need to minus 2 on my other side of the equation as well. The plus 2 and the minus 2 cancel out, and I have nothing left. All that leaves me with on this side of the equation is x. My equal goes on the line. 12 minus 2 is 10. If I look at my original problem, I know that 2 plus 10 does equal 12, so I know I completed my problem correctly. My next example of one-step algebra is x divided by 5 equals 10. Again, I need to get my x by itself on one side of the equation. I see that x is dividing by 5. The opposite of divide by 5 is times by 5. Whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to both. The divide by and times by 5 cancel out, leaving me with just x. 10 times 5 is 50. If I look at my original problem, I notice that 50 divided by 5 does equal 10, so I did the problem correctly. Please pause your recording right now and practice one-step algebra by doing 1 through 4. All right, let's look at these together. I start by drawing my line down the middle. My goal is to get the variable by itself, which is t. I have 7 plus t equals 8. The opposite of plus 7 is subtract 7. Subtract 7, t equals 1. On number 2, I have 12 minus x. This is kind of a different problem. The 12 is positive. So even though it's a minus x, this is a positive 12. The opposite of positive 12 is minus 12 minus 12. 9 minus 12 gives us negative 3. I have a negative x equals negative 3. Now, I do not want a negative variable. So the opposite of negative x, I can do the inverse of negative x, which is also negative 1x, and that gives me x equals 3. That is a peculiar problem that I put in. It's a little bit different, but it shows you one example of how one-step algebra can be tricky. My next two problems are pretty straightforward. I have r divided by 4. The opposite of divide by 4 is times by 4 times by 4, r equals 48. And finally, the 3 and the x. I know that if there is no symbol between the 3 and the x, that I am multiplying. The opposite of 3 times x is 3 divided by. Excuse me, it's 3x divided by 3. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. X equals 9. That is one-step algebra. If you feel that you need additional practice with one-step algebra, please complete page 65, numbers 1 through 12 in your math book. You may show those example problems to Mr. Baker or myself. I am in room 163, and I can check those off for you to see if you are doing them correctly. All right, let's move on to two-step algebra. Two-step algebra, you follow the same principles as one-step algebra. I again start by drawing my line right down the middle through the equal sign, and again my goal is to get the variable by itself. Let's demonstrate on the first problem. Now, for 3x plus 2, I have to get rid of the 3 and the 2 in order to get my variable by itself. The way you start these is that I have the 3x and the plus 2. I start away with what's not attached to the variable. The 3 and the x are attached, so the 3 is attached to the variable. So I'm going to start with the 2. The opposite of plus 2 is minus 2. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to both. That cancels this out. On this side, I have 3x left. 14 minus 2 is 12. I have 3x equals 12. Now, since there is no sign, I know the 3 and the x are multiplying. The opposite of 3 times x is divide by 3. Divide by 3, x equals 4. If I go back to my original problem and insert 4 for x, I have 3 times 4 plus 2. 3 times 4 equals 12. 12 plus 2 equals 14. And that's what I got in my problem. I know I did this correctly. Please pause this recording right now and complete numbers 1 through 4. Back to it. I begin with drawing my line right down the equal sign. Now, I'm going to start with the number that's not attached to the variable. The y divided by 3 is attached, so I'm going to start with the minus 2. The inverse of minus 2 is plus 2. What I do to one side, I have to do to both. On this side, the plus 2 and the minus 2 cancel out. I just have y divided by 3 remaining. 5 plus 2 is 7. Now, the inverse of y divided by 3, since the inverse of division is multiplication, I times 3 times 3. That crosses those out. All I have left is y. 7 times 3 is 21. 21 is my answer. For number 2, even though the equation's flipped, my goal is still to get the variable by itself. The variable in this problem is q. The 3 and the q are attached, so I start with the 1. The opposite of plus 1 is minus 1. Minus 1. That leaves me with 3q left on my right-hand side of the equation. 10 minus 1 is 9. The 3 times in the q are multiplying. The opposite of multiply is divide. Divide by 3. Divide by 3. Q equals 3. For my next problem, my numbers start to increase, but that's okay. The principles are the same. The 4 and the c are combined. They are, so I'm going to start with the minus 20. The inverse of minus is plus, so I know to plus 20, plus 20. That cancels out the 20 on this side of the equation, leaving me with 4c. 80 plus 20 is 100. 4 times c, the inverse of multiplication, is division. Divide by 4. Divide by 4. C equals 25. My final problem is x divided by 2 plus 1 equals 4. Again, I start with what's not attached. That is the 1 in this instance. Minus 1, minus 1. That leaves me with x divided by 2. 4 minus 1 is 3. The inverse of x divided by 2 is multiply times 2. Multiply times 2. X equals 6. If these are unclear and you feel like you need more help, please complete page 70, 1 through 10 in your math book. That will give you additional help on two-step algebra. And again, you may show your work to Mr. Baker or myself. All right, that is 1 and 2-step solving algebra problems. When we get more complicated, we have to learn how to simplify our problems. We will start by combining like terms. I mentioned like terms before. Let's look at my first example. If I had 5c and a 6c, I could combine those because 5 plus 6 is 11 and get 11c. The only reason I can combine them is because they both have c's next to them. So they are like terms. In my next example, I have 2x plus 3 plus 4x. I can combine my two greens in this one, which are my x's. 2x plus 4x equals 6x. And since the 3 does not have an x next to it, I cannot combine it with my other terms. My final answer, since I cannot do anything with the 3, is 6x plus 3. I will demonstrate the next one. 2c plus 4 plus 3 plus 4c. I will color code this first so you're able to visualize which ones that you can combine. I notice that my 2c and my 4c are similar because they both have c's next to them. They are like terms. So 2c plus 4c is 6c. Also, my 4 and my 3 are similar because they are just numbers with no variable attached. So I know 4 plus 3, I have 7. My final answer is 6c plus 7. I do not need to solve for the variable in this instance because there is no equal sign in the original problem. Please practice the next two. Pause your recording now. For number 2, we can combine the 5b and the 3b. Now, you have to look at the sign in front of the number. In front of the 3b is a minus. So that either makes it minus 3b or a negative 3b, depending on how you like to say it. 5b minus 3b is 2b. I can look at my t's. Again, I look in front of the number. I see this is a positive 8t. Positive 8t minus t. When a variable is by itself, that is the equivalent to a 1t. If there's just a variable, we know that there is a 1 next to it. 8t minus t is a positive 7t. Number 3. 4r, I see that's a positive because there's no sign in front of it, minus 3r. Again, I look in front of the problem, and it's in front of the number, and it shows me that is a negative or a minus 3r. 4r minus 3r is the same as either 1r or just r. Next, I have a negative 5 and a positive 7. If I combine negative 5 and positive 7, that gives me a positive 2. My answer, when combined, is r plus 2. Or you could also have 1r plus 2 as well. The next way to simplify is what we call the distributive property. The distributive property, often in math, we signify it with arrows. It's when you have a number outside of a parenthesis and you have to distribute that number to everything in the parenthesis. For my example, I draw the arrow to b, that's a times b, that gives me ab, and then a times c gives me ac. Again, distribute means to give to each number. This is maybe seem kind of abstract because we're using variables. Let's do some practice without the variables. Again, here I have an example. My distributive property is 8 and then 5 plus 3. I distribute to the 5 and I distribute to the 3. I have 8 times 5 plus 8 times 3. That is the distributive property. Let's practice. Please pause this recording now and complete the distributive property on number 1 and 2. All right, so when I do the distributive property, I have 8 times 2, and I need to distribute times the 4. So 8 times 2 plus 8 times 4. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 4 is 32. When I add them, I should get 48. The next one, this is where we start to incorporate variables. Again, I distribute to everything inside of the parentheses. 9 times a is 9a, plus 9 times 2 is 16. I cannot go any further since the 9 has an a attached, and the 16 does not. They are not like terms, so we cannot combine. 9a plus 16 is my answer. All right, now that we know how to combine like terms and use the distributive property, let's look at a problem that has both of these concepts in it. I will demonstrate the first one. I notice that I can do the distributive property in this problem. I see the 4 is directly outside the parentheses, and that indicates to me that I need to distribute to each inside. So I have 3x. I can't do anything with that 3x yet. It's just by itself out there. Next, I have 4 times x. 4 times x gives me 4x. And I have a 4 times a negative 5, which gives me negative 20 or minus 20, whichever way you'd like to look at that. When I look at this problem, I see that I can combine like terms. The 3x and the 4x both have the x variable attached, which indicates that I can do the 3x plus the 4x, which gives me 7x. And the 20 does not have a variable, so I am not able to combine that with the other terms. 7x minus 20 is my final answer. Please pause the recording and do the next problem. Again, I look at this problem and I see the 3 directly outside the parentheses, indicating that I need to do the distributive property. 3 times b gives me 3b. 3 times 3 gives me a positive 9. And then I bring everything else down. I look at my terms. I have a 3b and a minus b. 3b minus b gives me 2b. And I have a positive 9 and a positive 16. Positive 9 plus positive 16 is positive 15. 2b plus 15 is my answer. Since there is no equal sign, I do not need to solve for b or solve for the variable. 2b plus 15 is my final answer. Let's get some more practice with combining like terms and distributive equations. Please, excuse me. Before you pause, I should note that there is an equal sign in these problems, which means that I need to solve for x. So I need, for the first one, I need to combine the like terms, and then you will conduct two-step algebra. Again, since there is an equal sign, I do more than just combine. I combine and then solve for x. Please pause your recording now and complete number 1. Looking at number 1, I see I have a 3x and a minus 6x. Remember, look in front of your number to see if it is positive or negative. 3x minus 6x gives me a negative 3x. Since I cannot combine anything else, I'm going to bring down the 12, and that equals negative 9. Now, again, since there's an equal sign, I need to solve for x. The negative 3, I start with my line actually, and then I start with what's not attached to the variable. You'll remember that from two-step algebra. So I have the negative 3 and the x are attached, and the plus 12. I start by minusing 12, minusing 12. Cancels that out. Negative 9 minus 12 is negative 21. I have minus 3x left. The negative 3 and the x are multiplying, which means I need to divide by negative 3, divide by negative 3. X equals negative 21 divided by negative 3. 21 divided by 3 is 7, and a negative divided by negative is a positive. Positive 7 is my answer. In that problem, I combined like terms, and then I solved. Let's look at number 2. Again, we need to do the distributive property, and since there is an equal sign, we will solve for x. Pause your recording and do this now. Okay. I do my distributive property since my 4 is right outside the parentheses. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times minus 5 or 4 times negative 5 gives me a minus 20 or a negative 20 equals 12. Again, I have two-step algebra. The 4 and the x are attached, so I'm going to begin with the minus 20. The inverse of minus 20 is plus 20 plus 20. That cancels those out. I have 4x equals 12 plus 20 is 32. The 4 and the x are multiplying, so I know to just divide by 4, x equals 32 divided by 4, which is 8. We moved through that pretty quickly. If you feel that you need extra help on combining like terms and distributive properties and when to solve for the variable and when not, complete page 81, numbers 1 through 9 in your math book. If you're confused right now and you feel like you need extra help, please come see myself or Mr. Baker as soon as possible. Moving right along, let's move to multi-step equations. Multi-step equations are the one place that students seem to get most confused on. It is the last part of our unit, and it incorporates the most steps. I will demonstrate the first one. Please watch closely. It might be helpful for you to write this along and use this as an example when you're solving your problems. So, as always, I put a line right down the middle of my equal sign. I do this because it helps me visualize that there are two sides of the equation. What's different about the multi-step equations is that I have variables on both sides of the equation. I have to figure out a way to combine these variables first before I solve the problem. Now, I cannot cross the equal sign or my line without doing the inverse. I have to figure out a way to get my 9z combined with the 14z. But I have to do the inverse. The inverse of plus 9z is minus 9z. Minus 9z. I often get the question, could I start with the 14z? Yes, I could have done minus 14z as well. But if I would have minus 14z, I know 9z minus 14z would have given me a negative, and I like to deal with positive numbers. So I decided to work with the 9z. On this side, that crosses out the plus 9z and then minus 9z, and all I'm left with is negative 8. On my left side of the equation, I am left with 2 plus 5z, because 14z minus 9z is 5z. Again, you'll see I am right back to my two-step algebra. My recommendation is to master two-step algebra. If you can do two-step algebra, you'll notice all these certain types of problems always come back to two-step algebra. My 5 and my z are attached, so I'm going to start with the 2. Minus 2, minus 2. Negative 8 minus 2 is negative 10, not negative 6. Negative 10. I have 5z left. 5z equals negative 10. The 5 and z are multiplying, so I know I have to divide. Divide by 5, divide by 5. Negative 10 divided by 5 is a negative 2. Again, I would use that as your example for the following problems. Please pause your recording and practice on the next problem. All right. Now, again, I have to find a way to get my variables on the same side of the equation. Since I don't want to deal with negatives, I'm going to try to get the 2x and the 5x combined. I have a minus 2x. The inverse of minus 2x is plus 2x. Plus 2x. You don't want to break the 2 and the x up by dividing yet. You just want to get it over to the other side. So this cancels out. I have 14 equals 5x plus 2x is 7x minus 7. The 7x, 7 and the x are combined. So I'm going to start with the minus 7. I know the opposite of minus is plus 7 plus 7. 21 equals 7x. The 7 and the x are multiplying, so I know to divide by 7. Divide by 7. 21 divided by 7 equals 3. The last practice problem is it incorporates multi-step equation and the distributive property. Please use everything that you've learned and pause the recording and complete this now. All right. Everything we have learned, we are having fun now. So I draw the line all the way down. Get that out of the way because we'll need a few steps. So let's start with the distributive property. The 9 is right outside the parentheses, so I have to times it by everything within the parentheses. 9 times 3x is 27x. 9 times 4 is 36. And on the other side, I still have 7x minus 4 I haven't touched yet. Voila. We are two multi-step equations. Now, I have to combine the x's, and I have to get them on the same side of the equation. Again, I could minus the 27x, but I like to deal with positive numbers, so I'm going to get rid of the 7x first. Minus 7x minus 7x. That gives me negative 4 left over here, because those cancel out. 27x minus 7x is 20x plus 36. Back to two-step algebra. The 20 and the x are combined, so we're going to start with the 36 minus 36 minus 36. Negative 4 minus 36 is negative 40 equals 20x. I divide by 20, divide by 20. Oh, I know that's squished. I apologize. And negative 40 divided by 20, x equals negative 2. If you can solve that problem, you can do anything on this exam. If you are still having trouble solving the multi-step equations, this website below is the Khan Academy. If you type in this URL, type in this website, or I guess you can't copy and paste, so just type this website in, you will get a video. And the person who does this video does a very nice job of explaining multi-step equations. They also do it in a visual way, which I really enjoyed. So if you are still having trouble with multi-step equations, I really recommend visiting this website. Here is your final review. I created 6 problems on here that will look a lot like the test, and it has every concept that we've covered. So if you can solve these 6 problems, you are completely prepared for this test. So I would pause your recording now and see if you can solve all 6 of these problems. All right, let's do this. So looking at my first one, there is no equal sign. So I know I don't need to solve for any variable. I just need to combine. I notice that I have a 2z and a negative 4z, and I have a 4r and a positive r. 2z minus 4z gives me a negative 2z. A 4r and an r, which I know is the same as 1r, gives me a positive 5r. I have negative 2z plus 5r, or you can also have that switched. My next problem is two-step algebra. I have 2z plus 8 equals 38. The 2 and the c are combined, so I'm going to start with the plus 8. The inverse of plus 8 is minus 8, minus 8. That crosses that out. I have 2c equals 30. The 2 and the z are multiplying, so I divide. That leaves me with c. 30 divided by 2 is 15. Number 3, I tried to trip you up here. Number 3 is actually just one-step algebra. So I have 3x equals 21. The 3 and the x are multiplying. The opposite of multiply is divide. Divide by 3. Divide by 3. X equals 7. Number 4 is back to two-step algebra. X divided by 4 minus 1 equals 2. The x divided by 4 are combined, so I'm going to start with the minus 1. Plus 1, plus 1. That leaves me with x divided by 4 and 3. The opposite of divided by 4 is times by 4, times by 4, x equals 12. Again, if I wanted to insert my final answer for x, 12 divided by 4 is 3, 3 minus 1 is 2. I know I did it correctly. Number 5 is beginning my multi-step equations. I have variables on two different sides of this problem. I need to figure out how to get the variables together. So I need to get the 2y over with the 12y. That is a positive 2y. The opposite of positive 2y is minus 2y minus 2y. On the left-hand side, that leaves me with 10y equals 40. The 10 and the y are multiplying, so I know I need to divide by 10. Y is left by itself on the left side, and on the right side I have 40 divided by 10. I know 40 divided by 10 is 4. 4 is inserted for y. And finally, the granddaddy of them all, I have the distributive property with multi-step equations. So I again draw my line, and I am going to start this problem with the distributive property. 6 times f gives me 6f plus 6 times 5, which gives me 30. I will bring everything else down on the other side because it is already simplified. I need to figure out a way to combine the variables. The opposite of positive 2f is minus 2f minus 2f. 6f minus 2f gives me 4f, and then I'll just bring everything else down. Plus 30 equals negative 8 because I already took care of the positive 2f and the negative 2f. Gives me a negative 8. And again, I am back to, that's a bad f. That is a poor f. I apologize. I am back to two-step algebra. 4f plus 30 equals negative 8 minus 30 minus 30. That equals negative 38. 4f equals negative 38. And this, I didn't even make that a whole number for you. When I divide by 4, let's bring that up here. I have 4f equals negative 38. Divide by 4. Divide by 4. F equals negative 9 times 4 is 36, so I know it's a big 9. There's 2 left over. 2/4. If I simplify that, I get negative 9 and 1/2. That is a very complicated problem. If you are able to solve that problem, you are able to solve anything on this assessment. There is your Chapter 2 Algebra Section 1 review. Please see me if you need any additional help at 7:30 Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or during the 8th grade lunch, and you will receive however much help that you need. Thank you for your help. My phone number is 720-561-7450, and my email address is Brandon, BRANDON, .slade@bvsd.org. Thank you again. I had fun. I hope you did as well, and let's ace this test.